Veteran bought an abandoned farm for $1. His dog's discovery was worth $20 million. The wind rolled off the Montana plains in slow, heavy breaths, carrying the smell of frozen earth and pine smoke. The sign that read Silver Creek County Line leaned sideways, half buried in snow. A lone pickup came down the gravel road, engine coughing like an old man clearing his throat. Behind the wheel sat Elias Carter, 38, a veteran of 2 tours in Afghanistan, a man who looked as if he had spent too long standing between 2 worlds. In the passenger seat, Titan watched the horizon. The German shepherd's ears twitched at every shift of the wind. His coat caught the dull light, black and bronze like forged metal. He wasn't just a dog to Elias, he was the last soldier left from the field where the rest hadn't made it back. The truck stopped before a rusted gate. Beyond it stood the farmhouse, a carcass of weathered wood and silent windows, the kind of place that made you feel watched. Elias stepped out, boots sinking into snow. He studied the deed folded in his coat pocket. $1. That was all it had cost him. A clerical error, the bank had said. A chance to rebuild, he'd told himself. But now, staring at the structure leaning against the grey sky, he wondered if the land had chosen him instead. Inside, the air smelled of dust and iron. The floorboards sighed under each step. A cracked photo frame lay on the counter, 3 people smiling in front of a red barn. Someone had loved this place once. Elias pushed open a back door. It creaked like an old throat clearing. Titan padded past him, nose low, tail stiff. The barn behind the house was half collapsed, its roof sagging like a wounded wing. Titan stopped short at the entrance, a growl rising low in his chest. Elias froze. In war, that sound meant move or die. He followed Titan's stare to the far corner, where the dirt floor looked oddly smooth, like it had been pressed flat. "Easy, boy," Elias whispered. Titan barked once, sharp, certain, and began digging. Clods of frozen earth flew. After a few seconds, the shovel of his paws struck something hard. Metal. Elias knelt beside him, scraping away the dirt until a rusted plate appeared. Steel, thick, with a small hole in the center. He tapped it with his knife. The sound rang hollow, echoing below like there was a chamber underneath. He sat back on his heels, pulse thudding in his throat. The logical part of him said it was a septic tank or storm shelter. The other part, the one trained to listen for the things unsaid, felt the quiet shift. The air around them thickened. Even Titan went still, ears forward, eyes locked on the ground. Elias tried to pry at the plate, but it didn't budge. He marked the spot with a broken shovel and headed inside. Night was coming fast. He built a small fire in the living room fireplace, feeding it with torn floorboards. The flames painted the walls in restless light. Titan lay near the hearth but didn't relax. Every few minutes his head would lift toward the back door, ears twitching to something Elias couldn't hear. "Nothing out there," Elias murmured, but his own voice sounded uncertain. The clock on the mantel ticked, though no batteries sat inside. Somewhere in the walls, a pipe groaned. Elias leaned back in the chair, exhaustion pressing on him like a weight. He wasn't afraid of the dark. He'd lived in it long enough. But this silence was different. It didn't rest. It listened. Sometime after midnight, Titan's sudden bark ripped through the stillness. Elias jolted up. The dog stood rigid, staring toward the barn. The hairs along his neck were raised. A cold draft crept under the door, carrying a faint metallic scent, ozone and rust. Elias grabbed his flashlight and coat, then followed Titan outside. The beam cut through the snow like a blade. The barn loomed ahead, black against the moonlight. Titan moved first, low and deliberate, his body language shifting from guard to hunter. When they reached the corner where the plate lay, Elias felt the ground tremble under his boots. Just once, a low vibration, as if the earth exhaled. Titan barked again, claws raking the dirt. Elias crouched beside him, shining the light. A thin line of steam rose from the hole in the steel. Warm, fresh, impossible in this cold. A sound followed, faint but real. A hollow metallic click from somewhere below. Then silence. Elias's heart pounded. He looked at Titan, whose eyes glowed in the flashlight's circle, steady and fierce. The dog wasn't afraid. He was waiting. "What the hell did you find, boy?" Elias whispered. The wind howled through the trees, scattering snow like ash. Titan didn't move. He stood guard over the plate, ears pricked, as though guarding a grave. Or a secret. By morning, the snow had covered their tracks. The world outside looked untouched. But in the barn, beneath that thin layer of frost, the metal plate still pulsed faintly with heat, like a heartbeat under ice. Elias poured coffee from the dented pot and stared through the window. Titan sat near the door, eyes on the field. Neither of them spoke, but both felt it. The land wasn't empty. Somewhere below their feet, something was waiting to be remembered. The sun barely broke through the grey clouds the next morning. A thin frost covered the windows, muting the world outside. Elias moved through the house with a broom and a garbage bag, trying to sweep away the ghosts that clung to every surface. Dust floated like snow in the weak light. The place had been empty for decades, but it still breathed faintly, like a body that refused to die. He found the old study behind a locked door on the second floor. The key was still in the lock, rusted but stubbornly intact. Inside, the air was stale, lined with the smell of paper and oil. Maps covered the walls, Montana's geological layers sketched in careful lines. A name was stamped on several documents. James Greer, Senior Geologist, Helix Dynamics Energy Division. Elias sat at the desk, flipping through brittle pages. Reports dated back to the 1980s. Subterranean anomaly detected beneath northern parcel. One file read. Handwritten notes ran in the margins. Temperature spike, non-volcanic, unstable gas pocket. Then the last page, torn halfway through, ended abruptly with a single line. Do not dig further without clearance. Titan padded in, nails clicking against the floor. He sniffed the air once, twice, and growled low. His tail stood straight, body tense. Elias frowned. The dog wasn't reacting to the papers. He was looking through the wall. What is it, boy? Titan's ears flicked toward the north window. The far pasture stretched beyond it, a slope of dead grass leading to a small patch of evergreens, the same direction as the metal plate. That afternoon, Elias went outside with a bundle of survey rods and a borrowed ground probe from the hardware store in town. The man at the counter, an old rancher with a weathered face, had raised an eyebrow when Elias told him where he lived. "You're on the Greer property?" The man asked. "Yeah, bought it last week. Why?" "Used to be a restricted zone after '87. There was a blast up there. Folks said it was a gas leak, but—" He trailed off, tapping the counter. "Some things are better left buried." Now, under a hard winter sun, Elias pressed the first probe into the ground north of the barn. The soil there felt wrong, too soft, too hollow. He pushed deeper. At 3 feet, the rod struck nothing solid. He moved 20 yards west, tried again. The same result. He marked each spot with red flags. After 10 markers, a pattern emerged, a perfect oval stretching beneath the slope. A chamber. Titan stayed near his side, pacing in slow circles, nose twitching. Every few minutes he would stop, hackles raised, staring at the earth. Once he let out a sharp bark and began digging, throwing dirt behind him in furious bursts. Elias knelt to calm him, but froze when the ground trembled faintly, just enough to make the loose soil shiver. He stood, brushing dirt from his gloves. "We're not alone down there, are we?" he muttered. That night, the air felt heavy. Elias sat at the kitchen table with a lantern, spreading Greer's documents across the wood. The handwriting grew more frantic near the end, scribbled equations and phrases like resonance field and containment breach. He traced one map where Greer had drawn a red circle, exactly where Titan had been digging. From outside came a short, sharp bark. Elias grabbed his coat and flashlight, stepping onto the porch. The cold bit through his jacket. Titan stood in the yard, ears pinned, staring toward the north slope again. Elias followed the dog through the snow, the beam of light bouncing ahead of them. When they reached the line of red flags, Titan stopped dead. The wind had shifted, carrying a faint smell, acrid, metallic, familiar in a way that twisted Elias's stomach. He had smelled it once before, overseas, just before a buried device went off. He crouched, pressing his palm to the ground. The soil was warm. A whisper of movement came from below, a deep groan like something settling. Elias backed away slowly. Titan stayed between him and the spot, teeth bared, low growl rumbling. "Easy," Elias said quietly. "We're backing out." The next morning he drove into town for supplies. The locals watched him with a kind of polite unease. At the diner, a waitress refilled his coffee and nodded toward his muddy boots. "You living up at the old Greer place?" He nodded. Her eyes softened, but her voice dropped. "My uncle worked there. Said after the explosion, men in black trucks came and sealed everything off. They said it was methane, but no one ever found Greer's body." Back at the farm, clouds had gathered, dimming the afternoon light. Titan waited on the porch, tail sweeping the boards once before he stood. The dog's gaze locked again on the northern field. Elias looked at the flags fluttering in the wind. For the first time since he'd arrived, the land didn't feel like his. It felt like it was holding its breath. He walked to the barn door, staring at the ground that had trembled the night before. Somewhere beneath, an entire chamber was waiting. Not a natural one. Too perfect. Too still. Titan pressed against his leg, eyes sharp, breathing steady. Elias rested a hand on the shepherd's neck. "Whatever's down there," he said, voice low, "we're going to find out." But as the wind pushed across the field, carrying that same metallic tang, Elias realized something else. He wasn't the only one digging. The earth, in its own way, seemed to be listening back. Snow had begun to fall again, soft and relentless, covering Silver Creek in white silence. Elias spent most of the morning repairing a broken step in the hallway when Titan started barking at the ceiling. It wasn't the sharp, warning bark he used for intruders. This one was different, urgent, directed. "Up there." Elias followed his gaze. A square panel in the hallway ceiling marked the entrance to the attic. He dragged a chair under it and pushed open the hatch. Dust poured down like ash. The smell of paper and old insulation filled the air. The attic was narrow, lit by a single sliver of daylight from a cracked vent. Boxes stacked high along the rafters were covered in decades of dust. Titan stood below, whining softly as if urging him on. Elias climbed up and knelt beside the largest box. Inside were files labeled Helix Dynamics, restricted, along with notebooks, a slide projector, and bundles of letters tied with string. Most were addressed to Helix Administration, Denver. But one envelope sat apart, yellowed, never sealed, with a name written in faded ink. For my daughter, Claire. He opened it carefully. The paper inside was fragile, edges curled from age. "My dear Claire, if you are reading this, it means they've silenced me. I've found something buried beneath our own fields. They call it Nova, an energy field that hums like a living thing. If harnessed, it could power the nation for centuries, clean and limitless. But Helix wants to weaponize it. They're lying to the government, and if I speak up, I won't live to see you again. Remember this place. The truth is under our feet. Love, Dad. Elias sat still for a long time. The words felt too deliberate, too certain. They've silenced me. It wasn't paranoia. It was a warning. He folded the letter, staring out the small attic vent. Snow whipped across the fields, and in the distance, Titan moved along the fence line, nose buried in the drift. The dog had been restless since sunrise, drawn again and again to the northern slope. When Elias climbed down, Titan was already at the back door, tail stiff, eyes burning with focus. "Show me," Elias said quietly. They crossed the field, snow crunching under boots and paws. Near the old oak, Titan began digging furiously. Elias dropped to his knees beside him, brushing away the snow until his glove hit metal. A round object, about the size of a saucer, half buried in frozen soil. It gleamed faintly beneath the dirt. He pried it free. It was heavier than it looked, scorched around the edges. In the center was a logo, a spiral made of interlocking triangles. The word Helix etched beneath it. The metal was warm to the touch, almost alive. "Good work, boy," Elias whispered, though his voice was tight. Titan stood guard over the hole, chest rising fast, ears twitching at every gust of wind. That night, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that the air itself had changed. Every light in the house flickered once around midnight. Titan lifted his head, ears pricked, and stared toward the barn again. The next morning, Elias loaded the strange disc into a cloth bag and drove into town. He didn't go to the sheriff. He went to Helen Brooks, the town's veterinarian, a woman in her 40s with calm eyes and a past that smelled faintly of combat boots and antiseptic. When he walked into her clinic, she was finishing stitches on a horse's leg. "You're early," she said without looking up. "Titan's checkup isn't for another week." "It's not about that," Elias said, setting the bag on her counter. "Found something on the property. Thought you might know what it is." She wiped her hands, opened the bag, and frowned. The color drained slightly from her face. "Where did you get this?" "Northfield. Titan dug it up." Helen turned the disc over in her gloved hands, tracing the burned markings. "This isn't farm equipment, not even close. I saw similar materials during my army years. Classified tech, early containment modules, Project Halo." Elias frowned. "Never heard of it." "You wouldn't have. It was shut down in '87 after a test site accident. Officially they said methane ignition. Unofficially we lost half a research unit. You said this was on your land?" "Under the field," Elias said. "There's more. The ground's hollow. And Greer, your friend Greer, left a letter saying Helix wanted to weaponize some energy source down there." Helen's expression hardened. "If this is real, you're sitting on a federal crime scene, and if Helix buried it, they'll come back for it." As if on cue, Titan barked from outside, 2 sharp warnings. Elias and Helen rushed to the window. A black SUV rolled past the clinic, slow, deliberate, its tinted windows reflecting the morning light. No plates. Helen met Elias's eyes. "You need to get off that property." Elias shook his head. "Not until I know what they buried under my feet." She handed the disc back, her tone quieter but edged with fear. "Then watch yourself. If Titan found one of these, there are more. And whatever Project Halo was, it wasn't built to be unearthed." When Elias returned home that evening, the air felt thicker, charged. Titan met him at the gate, body tense, eyes scanning the horizon. The snow had melted around the spot where they'd dug earlier, leaving a faint circle of steam rising from the frozen soil. Elias crouched beside the dog. "We started something, didn't we?" Titan leaned closer, his breath visible in the cold air. Somewhere deep beneath them, The ground gave off a low, steady hum, barely audible, like the pulse of something alive waiting to wake. By mid-morning, the snow had stopped, leaving the world glazed in a dull, wet light. Elias was stacking firewood behind the barn when he heard the crunch of tires on the gravel road. A black SUV slowed to a stop at the gate. It didn't belong to anyone from Silver Creek. No rancher drove something that polished, that quiet. 3 men stepped out. Their coats were dark, their shoes too clean for the mud. The one in front smiled as he walked closer, hand raised in practiced politeness. "Mr. Carter, we're from Summit Insurance, working with Helix Dynamics on property assessments. Routine visit. We just need to verify some inventory records from the Greer estate." Elias didn't move. "Helix. Never heard from them until now. What records?" The man smiled wider. "Technical assets. Materials that might have been left behind. Nothing to concern you." Behind him, Titan growled low, deep enough to vibrate through Elias's boots. The shepherd stood half a step forward, tail rigid, eyes fixed on the strangers. "You can turn around," Elias said. "This land's private now." The man's expression didn't change, but his voice did. Flatter, colder. "Mr. Carter, Helix still holds legal claim to certain restricted items under federal contract. We'd appreciate your cooperation." I said no. For a moment the air seemed to tighten. The man studied. Elias then glanced at Titan. "You should keep your dog under control. Wouldn't want an accident." Titan's growl deepened, sharp and deliberate. The man took a slow step back, then turned to his team. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Carter. We'll be in touch." They left without another word. The SUV disappeared down the road, tires whispering on wet gravel. Elias stood there for a long time, jaw clenched, Titan still watching the horizon where the vehicle had vanished. "They weren't from any insurance company," he muttered. That night the storm came back, heavier than before. Wind scraped at the windows, and the trees bent under the weight of ice. Elias couldn't sleep. He sat by the fire with Titan beside him, going over the letter again and again. Each time he reached the line about "the truth under our feet," the same thought gnawed at him. They knew what was here. They'd come to take it back. Around midnight, Titan's head shot up. His ears swiveled towards the front door. Elias froze. Through the wind he heard it too, a faint crunch of footsteps outside, slow and deliberate. He grabbed his rifle and killed the lamp. The room fell into darkness, lit only by the ember glow from the hearth. Titan moved ahead of him, body low, silent. A flashlight beam swept past the window, cutting through the storm. Another followed. Elias crept toward the wall, heart pounding. Outside, he could hear the faint hum of an engine, parked somewhere near the tree line. He eased the curtain aside. 3 lights now. One moving toward the barn, another circling the back porch. The third stood still, aimed directly at the living room window. The glass shattered. The shot cracked through the silence, splintering wood beside his shoulder. Elias dropped to the floor. Titan lunged before he could stop him, bursting through the broken door into the storm. "Titan!" Elias grabbed his coat and ran after him, the cold slamming into his chest like a wall. He followed the sound of barking, fierce, furious, until he saw 2 figures struggling near the barn. Titan had one of them pinned, jaws locked on the man's arm. Another man tried to pull him off, but Titan twisted, ripping free a strip of fabric as the second man stumbled back, slipping in the snow. "Back!" Elias shouted, raising his rifle. The men froze. Then the SUV's headlights flared from the trees, blinding him. The engine roared to life. Titan let go, snapping once more before retreating to Elias's side. The men dove into the vehicle as it spun on the ice and tore away down the road, disappearing into the dark. Elias knelt beside Titan. Blood streaked the shepherd's muzzle, not his own. His breathing was steady, eyes still locked on the retreating lights. "You did good, boy," Elias whispered, running a hand over his fur. In the snow near the barn, something gleamed. A plastic card, half buried in mud. Elias picked it up and turned it over under his flashlight. The logo was unmistakable, the spiral triangles of Helix Dynamics. The name read Paul Vance, Field Operations Division. He exhaled slowly. Proof. They weren't just company men, they were security operatives. Back inside, he cleaned Titan's fur and bandaged a small cut along the dog's paw. Titan lay on the floor, eyes half closed but alert, every muscle ready for another sound. Elias stared at the ID card on the table. The edges were burned, melted around the logo. On the back, a handwritten note scrawled in red ink, "Retrieve subject, no witnesses." The storm raged outside, but inside, the farmhouse had gone utterly still. Titan lifted his head, ears twitching toward the window again, but this time Elias knew what the silence meant. They weren't finished, and now, whatever was buried under his land wasn't just a secret. It was something worth killing for. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving the land quiet and hollow. Elias hadn't slept. The Helix ID card sat on the table, edges blackened, the words "no witnesses" still echoing in his head. Titan paced near the door, restless, every few seconds glancing north toward the frozen slope. "You feel it too, don't you?" Elias murmured. Titan stopped, ears pricked, and gave a low bark, the kind that wasn't warning but insistence. The dog turned and trotted toward the back door, looking back once, urging him to follow. Elias grabbed his coat, flashlight, and sidearm, then followed Titan through the snow. The air was sharp, the world washed in pale morning light. They moved past the barn, over the field, toward the cluster of rocks near the northern ridge. Titan sniffed the ground, circling a patch of moss-covered stones. Then he began digging. Elias knelt beside him, scraping away the frozen dirt until his gloved hand hit metal. Beneath the moss lay a rusted hatch, nearly invisible under decades of grime. A steel handle stuck out, fused by time. He tried once, twice. The third pull wrenched it free with a shriek of iron. The hatch opened into a darkness that exhaled warm, stale air, like the breath of something long buried. "Stay close," Elias said. Titan obeyed, tail low but steady. The ladder led down 20 feet into a narrow tunnel lined with concrete and cables. The smell of oil and decay thickened as they descended. Elias's flashlight beam caught a door ahead, reinforced steel, half open. Beyond it lay a laboratory, frozen in time. Rows of rusted consoles and shattered monitors lined the walls. A table in the center was covered in dusty folders and a small tape recorder. The logo on the equipment was the same as the disc Titan had found. Helix Dynamics. Elias moved carefully, the floor creaking under his boots. He brushed dust from a wall map, layers of geological markings converging on a single red zone labeled Nova Field. The notes beside it read, "Estimated value, 18.6 million USD, raw potential, containment unstable." Titan prowled through the room, nose twitching, tail flicking through clouds of dust. He stopped near a metal cabinet, pawed at it once, then barked sharply. Elias crossed over, pulled the handle. Inside were sealed boxes, a few labeled core samples. Others simply said, "Do not transport." He opened the top drawer and froze. Inside lay a photograph. Greer, younger, smiling beside another man in military fatigues. At their feet sat a German shepherd with the same coloring as Titan, written on the back in faded pen. Titan. Best partner I ever had. Elias's chest tightened. He looked down at his own Titan, who stared back with intelligent, unblinking eyes. Coincidence, he told himself, but it didn't feel like one. He turned to the recorder and pressed play. Static filled the chamber, then a man's voice. Rough, strained, unmistakably Greer's. "This is James Greer. If anyone finds this, the project's gone too far. Helix lied about the readings. The Nova core isn't stable. It's alive. It reacts to frequency, to movement. When the last test failed, they wanted to bury it. But they can't contain what they don't understand." A pause. The sound of breathing, then a faint bark in the background. "If they find this before I can go public, I won't make it out alive. Neither will Titan. He knows something's wrong. He always knows." The recording cut off abruptly, followed by a faint metallic hum from somewhere deeper in the chamber. Titan stiffened, ears pinned. Elias turned slowly, light sweeping across the far wall. A metal door, half caved in by debris, rattled softly as if something inside was vibrating. He approached, each step echoing through the concrete. The hum grew louder, a low, rhythmic pulse, almost organic. The Geiger counter mounted on the wall began to tick faintly, though the machine was long dead. Titan let out a warning bark, sharp and commanding. "All right," Elias whispered. "We're done for today." He backed away, recorder in hand, and climbed the ladder with Titan close behind. When they emerged, the morning sun had turned the snow to glass. He shut the hatch and covered it again with rocks and dirt, sealing it like a grave. Back inside the farmhouse, Elias replayed the tape. Greer's words filled the kitchen, echoing off the old walls. "It's alive. It reacts." He looked at Titan, who lay by the door, eyes open, head resting on his paws. "You knew before I did," Elias said quietly. "You always do." From outside, the wind shifted, carrying a sound he couldn't explain, a faint vibration rising from the ground itself. Titan lifted his head, ears turning north. The hum was faint, but growing. Elias stood, staring toward the ridge through the frosted window. The land was no longer silent. It was breathing, and beneath it, the secret Greer had died to hide was stirring again. By the end of the week, Silver Creek wasn't quiet anymore. Rumors spread faster than the wind that swept down from the mountains. Someone at the diner had seen black trucks near the Carter farm. Another swore the ground up north glowed at night. Curiosity turned into gossip. Gossip turned into whispers, and whispers found their way back to Elias. He tried to ignore it, but by Tuesday afternoon, 2 men in tailored coats appeared at his gate. They didn't bother with pretense this time. The taller one introduced himself as Mr. Hale, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Carter, I represent a private investment group. We've been authorized to make you a generous offer for your land. 7 figures. All cash, no waiting." Elias leaned on the fence post, Titan at his heel. "And what exactly do you want with a rundown farm?" Hale's smile twitched. "You'd be doing yourself a favor. That property has liability concerns, environmental hazards. If you stay, you're putting yourself and your dog at risk." Elias's voice was steady. "I've handled worse." The second man, silent until now, took a step closer. "This isn't Afghanistan, Carter. You can't shoot your way out of this one." Titan growled, lips curling, and for a brief moment Elias saw the fear flicker in the man's eyes. The two exchanged a glance and turned back to the SUV. "You'll regret this," Hale said before getting in. When they were gone, Elias called Helen. She answered on the second ring, her tone tight. "They came to you, didn't they?" He nodded, pacing. "Said they wanted to buy me out. High offer. Too high." "They don't buy," Helen said quietly. "They erase. I told you Helix doesn't clean up their mess, they bury it." That night, Elias set up 2 motion-activated cameras, one by the north ridge, the other overlooking the barn. He'd done surveillance before, in another life, and the muscle memory came back easy. Titan followed every move, his amber eyes never leaving Elias's face. "All right, partner, Elias said, clipping the last camera in place. "If they come back, we'll know before they do." The temperature dropped after midnight. Frost climbed the window panes like silver veins. Elias had just started to doze when Titan shot upright, tail rigid. The dog's nose lifted, sniffing hard. Then came the sound, a faint hiss from outside. Elias grabbed his flashlight and rifle. Titan moved first, silent as shadow, guiding him across the field. The hiss grew louder near the ridge. When Elias reached the hatch, he froze. A thin ribbon of grey smoke curled up from the cracks between the stones. "Gas," he whispered. Titan barked once, sharp and urgent, then lunged at Elias's coat, tugging him backward. That single move saved them both. A second later, the earth shuddered, and a muffled explosion ripped through the ground. The hatch blew open, throwing dirt and flame into the air. The shockwave sent Elias sprawling. Titan skidded beside him, coughing, eyes wide. When the dust settled, the field was a smoking crater. The hidden chamber was gone, buried. Elias dragged himself up, ears ringing. Titan whined softly but stood, pressing against his leg. The air was thick with the acrid bite of chemicals. He could taste the metal on his tongue. Someone had tried to erase the evidence, and nearly erased them with it. At sunrise, he went back to what was left of the ridge. Most of the debris was unrecognizable, melted steel, blackened soil. But something caught the light. He knelt, brushing away ash until a small fragment of metal emerged. It was part of a plate, twisted and scorched. On the back, still legible beneath the soot, were stamped letters and numbers. U.S. Govt Property, Project Halo, Serial 042791. Elias stared at it for a long time. A federal serial number. This wasn't just a corporate experiment, it was military. He looked at Titan, who stood watch beside the crater, scanning the tree line. "We've been digging in the wrong direction," Elias said quietly. "This didn't belong to Helix. They were cleaning up for someone else." Back at the farmhouse, he checked the cameras. The one near the barn was intact. The northern one had been destroyed, signal cut 30 minutes before the explosion. But there was one frame, frozen mid-feed just before the screen went dark. Headlights in the trees. 2 vehicles, same black SUVs. He sat back, the recorder still clutched in his hand. "They're not just after what's buried," he murmured. "They're after anyone who's seen it." Titan nudged his arm, breaking his spiral. Elias rested his hand on the dog's head. "We'll play this smart, like the old days." That night, as wind swept across the blackened field, Elias could still hear faint popping sounds under the soil, like trapped air escaping. He didn't sleep. Neither did Titan. The shepherd lay by the door, eyes open, breathing slow but ready. The land was silent again, but it wasn't peace. It was the silence after a warning shot, the kind that meant someone was reloading. The morning after the explosion, the town was colder than usual. A low fog hung over Silver Creek, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Elias drove into town with Titan in the passenger seat, the truck engine groaning against the frost. He hadn't planned to involve anyone, but there was one man left who might know the truth. Sheriff Nolan. Nolan was a thick-shouldered man in his 60s, his face weathered from years in the sun. When Elias stepped into his office, the sheriff didn't look surprised. He just waved him in, closed the blinds, and poured 2 cups of coffee. "I heard about your little fireworks show," Nolan said quietly. "You're lucky to be standing." "They weren't fireworks," Elias replied. "That was a cleanup. Someone wanted to make sure no one ever found what's under my land." Nolan stared at him a long moment before sighing. "James Greer warned me this might happen." Elias froze. "You knew Greer?" Nolan nodded. "Served with him in Desert Storm. Smart man. Paranoid too, but he had reason. When he came back, Helix hired him for some government contract. I didn't know the details, just that it was tied to energy research. Then one night in '87, the ground up north shook like hell, and the next morning the feds had the area sealed off. Greer vanished. Official story said lab accident. Unofficially, they said he'd gone rogue. Gone rogue? Elias leaned forward. What was he trying to do? Expose them. Nolan reached into his desk and pulled out a small metal case. Inside was an old external drive, scratched and dented. This came to me in the mail 2 weeks after he disappeared. No note, just this, and a photo of a dog. Looked just like yours. Elias took the drive carefully, the weight of it heavy in his hands. I didn't have the tools to open it back then. Nolan continued. Didn't want to, honestly, but now, after what you've seen, maybe it's time someone did. Elias nodded. I'll handle it. Back at the farmhouse, Helen arrived with her laptop, and a look that said she already knew this was dangerous. Titan greeted her at the door, tail wagging once, before he lay down beside the table, like he understood the gravity of what was coming. Whatever's on that drive, Helen said. We do this offline. No internet, no backup, just us. Elias handed it over. The drive whirred softly as she connected it. Lines of code scrolled across the screen. Then, after a minute, a folder appeared. Project Halo Archive. Helen clicked it open. Inside were hundreds of files, reports, blueprints, security logs. And one video, labeled simply, Test Site 04, Final. She pressed play. The screen flickered with static before showing a room much like the chamber Elias had found. Greer stood in the frame, younger, eyes tired but alert. Around him were 4 soldiers in protective gear, adjusting dials on a metal core the size of a generator. A German shepherd sat beside him, ears perked, tail thumping softly. Greer spoke into the camera. Date, October 11th, 1987. Prototype Nova reactor entering Phase B ignition. Reading stable. Titan remains calm. Behavioral sync intact. Elias's throat tightened. Titan, he whispered. Helen looked up. He named his dog Titan too. On screen, alarms began to beep. A soldier shouted something off camera. Greer turned toward the reactor. Its light pulsed brighter, faster. Titan barked once, sharp and urgent, then again louder. Shut it down! Greer yelled. The men scrambled, hitting switches. Titan lunged forward, barking furiously at the control panel, pawing at the ground. Greer grabbed a fire extinguisher, then hesitated. A hiss filled the room, gas venting, systems failing. He's warning them, Helen whispered. Titan barked again, turned toward the exit, then ran back to Greer, pulling at his sleeve. Greer looked down at him, realization dawning. He hit the emergency alarm, shouting for everyone to move. The screen erupted in white light. Static filled the speakers. Helen froze the frame just before the blast. Titan's body was halfway turned toward the camera, his mouth open mid-bark, eyes locked on Greer. The timestamp blinked twice, then vanished. When the video resumed, the room was smoke and ruin. 2 soldiers were dragging each other out. Greer was gone. Titan was still. The feed ended. Silence filled the kitchen. Elias leaned back, rubbing his eyes. He tried to save them. The dog knew. Helen closed the laptop. And Greer vanished with the core. The reports say it was sealed beneath containment layers, deep enough that even Helix couldn't retrieve it without triggering another meltdown. That's why they buried the whole site under your land. They weren't protecting people, Elias. They were protecting the asset. Outside, thunder rolled far away. Titan lifted his head, eyes fixed north again. Elias followed his gaze through the window towards the ridge where the chamber had been. Greer's Titan had died trying to warn them. Now another Titan stood in the same place, alive, watching, guarding. Elias whispered, almost to himself, Maybe some things never really stay buried. Helen looked at him, You mean the reactor? He shook his head. No, the truth. Titan gave a low growl then, the kind that came before a storm. And somewhere in that silence, Elias realized they were no longer just witnesses. They were next. The rain started just before dusk, thin, sharp drops cutting through the cold air. Elias could feel it in his bones, the kind of storm that didn't come alone. Titan paced near the front window, tail rigid, ears twitching toward the sound of engines. Helen was at the kitchen table, packing the hard drive and Greer's documents into a waterproof case. You think they know? She asked. They always know, Elias said. He checked the rifle, chambered around, then shut off the lights. Outside, 2 beams cut through the rain. Headlights. Company, he said. By the time the first SUV skidded to a stop at the gate, Titan was already growling, a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. Elias peeked through the curtains. 3 vehicles, all unmarked. Men in tactical gear spilling out, night vision goggles glowing faint green. Federal? Helen whispered. Private, Elias replied. They're not here for justice. They're here to erase it. He grabbed the waterproof case, handed it to her. Stay low. If I tell you to run, you run. The first flashbang shattered the front porch light. Titan barked once, sharp, commanding. Elias ducked behind the couch as glass exploded inward. The air filled with the sharp tang of smoke grenades. Move! He shouted. Helen followed him through the kitchen and into the old barn out back. Rain lashed the tin roof as they barricaded the doors with hay bales and a rusted plough. Titan stayed by the gap in the boards, eyes burning like coals in the dark. The men advanced fast. Laser sights flickered across the field like fireflies. One of them shouted, "We just want the drive, Carter. Don't make this worse." Elias crouched by the window, whispering, "You already did." He fired once, shattering a headlight. Titan took the cue, darting out through the side door, weaving through the storm, barking to draw their attention away. Muzzle flashes lit the rain. "Titan!" Helen cried, but Elias held her back. "He's doing his job." Then came the sound, a faint hissing, low and steady, rising from beneath the barn floor. Titan reappeared, wet and mud-smeared, barking furiously toward the back wall. Elias followed his gaze and saw it, a metal valve half buried near the slope, connected to the old pipeline that once fed the underground chamber. He understood instantly. The hissing wasn't just air, it was the venting gas from the remnants of the Nova reactor. Helen looked at him in horror. "You're not thinking—" "It's already leaking," he said. "If they ignite it first, we don't walk out of here." He pulled off his jacket, wrapped it around Titan, who whined softly, pressing his nose against Elias's hand as if understanding what was coming. "Stay with Helen," Elias said. The dog refused to move. Outside, the men regrouped. One shouted, "Final warning, Carter! Hand it over!" Elias stepped into the open doorway, rain pounding his face. "Come take it." They raised their weapons. At that moment, Titan bolted past him, sprinting through the storm toward the ridge, barking wildly. The men turned instinctively. Elias ran to the valve, twisting it open. Gas hissed louder, a pale vapor rising through the rain. He pulled a flare from his belt, struck it against the metal. The spark ignited instantly, blooming into a blinding flash of blue. The ground roared. The explosion tore through the field like a living thing, splitting the night with a column of white fire. The shockwave slammed him to the ground. The barn disintegrated in a howl of metal and flame. When the world finally stopped shaking, everything burned, the earth, the rain, the air itself. The ridge had collapsed inward, swallowing the vehicles and the men who had come to silence him. The Nova chamber was gone, sealed forever under molten earth. Elias staggered up, coughing, ears ringing. He could barely see through the smoke. "Titan!" he shouted. A faint whine answered. He turned toward it. There, near the edge of the crater, Titan lay on the wet ground, chest heaving, one leg twisted, fur singed black along his flank. Elias dropped to his knees, gathering the dog into his arms. Titan's eyes flicked open, cloudy with pain but steady, loyal to the end. Elias whispered, "You saved us. You always save us." Helen stumbled toward them through the smoke, her face streaked with ash. Behind her, the rain finally began to drown the flames. Elias carried Titan across what was left of the field, the dog's weight heavy, but alive. Every step felt like a heartbeat against the silence that followed. When they reached the porch, he laid Titan on a blanket and sat beside him. The shepherd rested his head on Elias's lap, eyes fluttering. In the distance, the crater still glowed faintly blue, like the heartbeat of a buried sun. Helen looked at Elias, voice trembling. "What now?" He glanced down at Titan, who closed his eyes but still breathed, slow and steady. "Now," Elias said softly, "we finish what they started, and make sure it never happens again." The storm eased. The air smelled of rain and iron and something older, the scent of survival. And as the last embers of the firestorm faded into the night, Titan lifted his head one last time towards the ridge, watching, guarding, as if promising the land that no secret would ever sleep here again. The week after the explosion, Silver Creek no longer felt like the same quiet town. The ridge that had burned blue was now sealed off by federal vehicles, floodlights, and yellow tape that flapped in the wind. Reporters swarmed the diner. Drones hummed above the charred fields. The government called it a geological incident. The locals called it what it was, the night the sky caught fire. Elias watched it all from the porch, bandaged arm resting on his knee. Titan lay beside him, his left leg wrapped but healing. The shepherd's eyes followed every sound, every movement, as if still guarding what remained beneath the earth. Helen drove up the dirt road that morning, mud caked on her boots, exhaustion etched into her face. In her hand was a small flash drive, the last copy of Greer's files. "They'll come for this," Elias said quietly. "They already did," Helen replied. "Now it's the public's turn." That afternoon, she met with investigative journalists from Denver, people she trusted, people who couldn't be bought. They took the drive, the recordings, the photos of the serial plate, and Greer's letter. By dawn the next day, the story was everywhere. Leaked files reveal Helix Dynamics covered-up military energy project. Whistleblower scientist missing since 1987 linked to Nova reactor. Veteran and dog survive explosion that exposes $20 million energy scandal. The headlines spread faster than Helix could deny them. Within 48 hours, the Department of Energy and the Justice Department announced an official inquiry. Executives from Helix were subpoenaed. One was arrested trying to flee the country. Helen called Elias late that night. Her voice trembled between relief and disbelief. They confirmed it. The Nova field under your property, it's real. The mineral content alone is worth over $20 million. You were living on a fortune buried under your boots. Elias was silent for a moment, eyes drifting to Titan. The dog shifted, resting his head on Elias's knee, amber eyes glinting in the lamplight. "A fortune no one should ever dig up," he said finally. Helen exhaled. "They're offering you a settlement. Compensation for damages, for discovery rights, for your silence." "I don't want their money. What do you want?" Elias looked out at the dark horizon where the ridge used to rise. "Just to keep the land. Greer died trying to protect it. His Titan, too. I'll take care of what's left, for them." The call ended. Outside, the wind moved through the grass like a whisper from another time. Over the next few days, investigators swarmed the property. They set up sensors, drills, scanners, but found nothing more. The explosion had fused the ground into stone. Whatever had lived under there, energy, experiment, or secret, was gone for good. Reporters tried to reach Elias, camping on the edge of the road. He ignored them all. Titan guarded the gate, standing firm even when cameras flashed. The world might have called it luck, but Elias knew better. It wasn't luck. It was loyalty, the kind that transcended years, names, and even death. One morning, as the sun broke through a fog of ash, he noticed something near the crater. Titan was limping toward it, head low but tail wagging faintly. Elias followed and saw the object glinting in the dirt, a tarnished dog tag, half melted. He brushed the soot off. Titan, property of J. Greer. For a long moment, Elias couldn't move. Titan sniffed the tag, then looked up at him with those same unwavering eyes. "You found him," Elias whispered. "You finished what he started." He hung the tag beside the door, next to his own dog's collar. 2 names, side by side, tied by something deeper than blood or time. That evening, Helen returned one last time. "They're closing the case," she said. "Helix is finished. You made sure of that." Elias shook his head. Titan did. The shepherd was lying in the grass, watching the sunset bleed across the sky. His left leg still carried a faint limp, the fur along his side patched and scarred. But his spirit was unbroken. When Elias called, he rose immediately, tail sweeping the ground like the brushstroke of a quiet victory. Helen smiled. "He'll always carry that scar?" Elias nodded. "A reminder, loyalty leaves marks." They stood in silence as the light faded over the hills. The air was calm now, free of smoke and secrets. Silver Creek was quiet again, but not empty. Beneath the scarred earth, the truth had finally been unearthed. And above it, a man and his dog stood as the only witnesses left, not to power or wealth, but to the cost of both. As dusk settled, Titan limped to the edge of the field and lay down, his gaze fixed toward the horizon, as if keeping watch for the ghosts that still lingered in the wind. Elias sat beside him and whispered, "You did good, boy. You did real good." And in that quiet, between the chirp of crickets and the hum of distant thunder, it was clear. The land was no longer haunted. It was guarded. A year had passed since the firestorm turned Silver Creek blue. The ridge had healed, grass growing over the blackened earth, wild flowers curling through the cracks like the land itself was exhaling. What was once a battlefield now looked like peace. On that same soil, Elias built something new, a low wooden lodge, white trim, wide porches. The sign above the gate read, "Titan Haven, Training Center for Veterans and Rescue Dogs." Every morning, the air was alive with sound, boots crunching gravel, dogs barking in rhythm, the laughter of children. Some of the kids came from foster homes, others were orphans who found their way here through word of mouth. The veterans trained them side by side, learning patience, rebuilding trust, one command at a time. Elias walked among them with a quiet steadiness. His limp had faded, but the scar on his forearm still caught the sunlight like a pale reminder. Titan followed him everywhere. Older now, fur streaked with grey, his left leg marked with the scar that never fully healed. The shepherd had become a legend around Silver Creek, the dog that stopped a corporation, the survivor of the Blue Fire. But to Elias, he was still just Titan, the partner who never gave up, the heart that refused to forget. One morning, while the fog was still lifting from the fields, Elias stood on the porch, coffee steaming in his hand. Titan lay at his feet, head on his paws, eyes fixed on the distant hill where the Nova site once burned. A group of children played fetch with the younger dogs near the fence. One boy, maybe 9 years old, wandered up the steps, holding a worn tennis ball. He hesitated before asking, "Does he ever stop watching?" Elias smiled, his voice low, gentle. Only when the truth is safe. The boy frowned, curious. What truth? Elias looked out over the field. That even after everything burns, something good can still grow. The boy nodded slowly, as if trying to understand. Titan shifted, giving a soft huff, then pushed himself up and limped toward the boy, tail swaying lightly. The child threw the ball. Titan chased it. Not fast, not fierce, but steady, determined, each step deliberate. Helen appeared at the doorway behind Elias. She was smiling again these days, her face softer. They're saying the foundation wants to expand, she said. 2 more centers, one in Oregon, one in Colorado. Titan Haven's going national. Elias nodded. It was never about me. It's about what he started. Titan returned, dropping the ball at the boy's feet. The scar on his leg caught the sunlight, glowing like a silver badge. The boy patted his head. Titan's tail wagged once, slow and sure. Elias turned towards the ridge, where the grass bent in the wind. He could almost hear it again. The echo of that night, the hum beneath the soil, Greer's voice on the tape saying, "He always knows." Now, the hum was gone, the danger buried, the truth safe. The boy ran off laughing, and Titan returned to the porch, settling at Elias's side once more. Together they watched the horizon, the old soldier and the old dog. 2 survivors bound by silence, by scars, by loyalty that had outlasted war, greed, and fire. As the sun climbed higher, the light hit the lodge's sign, the carved letters glowing gold. Titan Haven. Elias reached down and scratched behind Titan's ear. "Rest easy, partner," he murmured. "You've done your part." Titan's eyes closed halfway, his breathing slow, the way it always did when he was content. But his ears still turned at every sound, the rustle of leaves, the echo of distant boots, the faint laughter of children learning to trust again. Because some dogs never stop guarding, not when they're trained, not when they're loved, not when the truth still needs watching. The camera pulled back, past the porch, past the fields, past the rebuilt ridge where green met sky. Sunlight spilled over the land, catching the faint shimmer of Titan's scar as he lay at peace beside his human. Then the screen faded to black, and a single line appeared across it. He didn't bark for food, he barked for the truth. And beneath it, a quiet invitation. What's your story with a loyal pet? Share it, honor it, and help us keep the spirit of Titan alive. Subscribe and support the German Shepherd channel, where every story finds its home.